Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Keynes, and Ed Mann.
Hi everyone, welcome to week 13 of Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast for PHP enthusiasts. And I am joined this week by the ordinary people I usually have, Mr. Ed Mann.
Yo, yo, yo.
Mr. Fraser Hart.
Hello, how you doing?
Well, good. But we are one night tonight. We have no Lewis Keynes. But yeah, we will
insert random joke here.
He's gone flower arranging this week.
Flower arranging, I think. Yeah,
I had such a good time last week that I kind of
how was it?
Flower arranging. It was good. I learned how to tie bows and stuff around flowers, and I learned that thorns are in thistles. Thorns are in thistles. Thorns are in roses, and you touch them with your hand and they hurt.
So a solid week well spent then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Lewis heard that I had such a good time, so that's where he's gone this week. Awesome. And I think he's gone in a dress as well.
Oh, dear. That's added on.
Where were you actually last week?
I was actually in London. As I mentioned before, I'm doing to people that don't know, I'm rowing across the Pacific in June this year, and I was in London basically learning how to navigate and doing various other things. So I'm going to be away next week for the same reason, and again in 2 weeks after that for the same reason. So unfortunately, it kind of hinders my ability to be here and record with you guys, which is a bit of a pain. But it will mean that I won't die.
But you're sounding good this week, though. For us.
I know. Yeah, we've had a bit of feedback from a couple of listeners and stuff, and the general consensus is that the sound quality is not that great. People seem to like the content, but we've had a few people say that the sound quality is not that good. So I got on Reddit and had a conversation with someone, which was kind of useful because it's the first time I've had a conversation on Reddit with someone that hasn't kind of made me really angry. So that was good. And he listened to the podcast and gave me some tips. And off the back of all the feedback and stuff, I've gone out and spent a bit of money on a microphone. So hopefully it sounds a bit better.
What microphone is it?
It is a Blue Yeti.
Ooh, very nice. Weird name, though. Weird name.
I know, it's a weird name. It's got a cool box, though, and it's got some sweet drawings all over it. And it sort of looks a bit like a Yeti, but it was more than I wanted to spend on a microphone. But what are you going to do?
It does sound really good, actually. Like it's more bassy. Because me and Ed, I think, sound quite trebly now.
Yeah, okay. I think it's because we're very echoey, aren't we? And you sound.
I don't know what treble means.
But I will. I was going to say I'll be close behind you, but I'm going to rephrase that. I will get a Blue Yeti at some point, but it'll probably be my birthday in May. Yeah. So, but
you never know. Like, we could end up listening to this, and it could sound like absolute crap. So,
always does.
Spent £100, yeah.
Yeah, it does sound good though. But other than that, had a good week.
It's been all right. Yeah. I actually had a play around with Python the other day.
Did you?
Yeah, we've only a tiny little play. I've never really touched it before, and obviously it seems to be one of those buzzwords that's going around at the moment. So it was nice to actually give it a go. We've got this the company I work for. We've got like a kind of like a marketing email system.
Yeah, and
the actual send script had been written in Python. And then one of our clients called us up and said, "Oh, I've been trying to send these emails out, and they don't seem to be getting anywhere." So I went and had a look and basically, had to get my hands dirty with Python. There was nothing wrong with the Python script in the end. It was just one of the variables that was stored in the database that wasn't getting through. But it was kind of nice to actually do something different and see how Python does actually work. And like these new kind of error messages, like wrong indentations and all that kind of stuff. Because obviously, if you've used it before, I guess you'll probably know these things a lot better than I do. But the actual kind of control blocks, like your ifs and stuff, are very dependent on how you indent them, rather than using curly braces, which was interesting to see anyway.
I think I played with Python like once, and like you say, that's the thing that I picked up on. It's quite strange in that respect. It's very different to anything else, really. But
I kind of like it though, because I guess it forces you to write cleaner code, and it won't let you be won't let you be sloppy. And
there is that. I must admit that is a pretty good feature. I guess it kind of forces you to get those good standards in, I guess.
Yeah. Because when I first looked at it and noticed that it didn't have all the kind of curly braces and all the kind of the stuff you're used to looking at with PHP, I was like, why does everyone like this? Because it looks a lot more like classic ASP than I would have liked. But yeah,
it's quite interesting because I sometimes get annoyed, like when people do like an if statement on one line,
Yep.
Sometimes I think it's better to spit it out in terms of a readability point of view.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, because it does kind of throw you a bit, and when you're sitting there reading through a page of code, and then you get to this one line if statement, it kind of throws you off a bit, and you have to actually sit there and concentrate on. But it's probably because I'm bad at web development. But,
Nice. Anything else notable in your week, or?
No, I don't think so. Actually,
Did you? I'll give you the opportunity to put in a little plug if you're ready to put in a plug for.
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
yeah. Go for it.
Okay, yeah, it's nothing big at the moment. There's a friend, well, Justin, that we've been chatting about, and he's going to be coming on the podcast in a couple of weeks. The designer guy, him and me have basically put our heads together and come up with an idea of doing like a web development or a web professional's job website. So if anyone's interested, it's only in the local area at the moment. It's webdesignjobsinkent.co.uk. And our plan's basically just to kind of advertise jobs for companies wherever they're looking for web professionals, because from experience I've kind of learned that there doesn't seem to be that many of us out there, to be honest with you. So we've been trying to hire people at the office for quite a large amount of time, and it's near impossible, to be honest. So we kind of put that together to help out people in our position and people that are looking for work.
I think it's a great idea, man, to specialize in that market. I mean, people told me that Stack Overflow is pretty good for that kind of thing.
Yeah, Stack Overflow seems pretty good. Yeah.
So it's definitely a requirement to hone in on just that particular area. I mean, in the past, I've looked at jobsinkent.com, but obviously you then have to like filter down to those jobs. So I think it's a great idea. Wish you best of luck with that, man.
Thank you very much,
Mr. Ed Mann. How have you been?
I've been good, sir. Yeah, I just as Fraser was saying, like the website looks awesome, and it's a really cool idea. And another thing is with Python, actually, the indentation, like the significant white space. At first, it does look a bit weird, and you're like, it's like I'm, using all this white space and stuff. But as you said, like it does make you program in a certain style that then everyone has to do, which is quite cool. Yeah. And another funny thing was on Hacker News a couple of weeks ago. I tweeted out there was like a link to Python with braces. So someone had actually made a fork of the Python Python code and interpreter, and actually included braces in it, and it looked weird. Like see the braces, to see the curly. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing quite a bit of Python at the moment, and at first you're kind of like, oh, this is really funky, and I'm actually going to like this, and you're like, it just feels a bit weird because you've always got those curly braces to kind of signify, so okay, I'm in this block and stuff. But when you start actually doing indentation and stuff, it makes things so much more easier because you then are forced to like use spaces and use new lines a lot. Yeah, so they're definitely an interesting language.
Awesome. So what are you doing in Python at the moment? Are you working with
web stuff? Web stuff really. I've been playing around with, because they've got a different model. They've got this thing called WSGI, WSGI, and it's a web server gateway interface. Because Python wasn't made for the web from the offset. The idea they made, like, because people wanted to use Python on the web, is everyone started to make their own versions of how to interact, how to make a response and a request. From a server. So you had your Sturt server, and then you Apache, and then you'd have like your Python application. PHP made its own version, to actually say this is the standard how you respond to it, and in fact actually just did it for you. With Python, you use something called WSGI, and then you interact with that, so it's kind of like an intermediate middle layer. And you can use it raw, or you can use it like with frameworks and stuff. But I've been playing around with it raw on its own, and it is really interesting. Like the idea of being able to compose like different, because the idea of middleware, so you can say like, actually, I want this, this application, and it's kind of like the modularity of that. I want this application to first go route through the auth, thing. And I mean, like I've been playing around with like my photo stuff, and I wanted to make something similar to like Lewis was talking about Tim Thumb, which has got that resizing thing. And I was like, well, I could make a middleware. And so I made this middleware that says, oh, look, if you ever get a URL that's like this, just go and actually run this script, which then uses the directory, grabs an image, resizes it, etc., and then sends it back. Else, just go up the chain and use the application that you were going to use before. So it's quite a nice. It's a different way of using it. Like we definitely wouldn't see it in the PHP world, but it's quite cool to see and how to use it in another world, really.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to say I won't pretend to be a Python expert. I've used it once, I think, to make like a Hello World script. But one of the podcasts I listen to is .NET Rocks, which I know I've talked about before, but I love that podcast. Like, for me, those guys are the people to look up to. They're really, really good, and I just find it really easy to listen to. But they were talking, I think, in last week's podcast about Jython, which is like a way of basically enabling you to code in Java and Python at the same time, and make them two communicate basically.
Yeah, so, it's Python 2.7, I think, on the JVM, which is great because it means then that you can use all the Java libraries in Python code, which is kind of cool. That's
really cool. Someone must have taken a lot of time to do that, I guess.
Yeah, because there's also JRuby as well, and that's actually because the JRuby one's a lot more mature, which is then Ruby on top of the JVM. Because the JVM is awesome. The JVM won't be. I think JVM will be around longer than the Java languages. Because you've got stuff like Clojure, you've got stuff like Scala. And it's great to be able to use these languages. Obviously, you're probably thinking, why don't you have PHP on the JVM? But
I am. That's exactly what I'm
thinking. But you're probably then it'd be too much like Java, really. So it's kind of like use Java instead.
Fair point. Yeah. Any other things to?
I did get an email from this guy a couple of days ago, which was quite cool. And he just asked, like, a big fan of the podcast, and he just said, like, have you got any tips for like learning programming concepts and stuff? Like, how do you like learn stuff? And I was like, well, that's quite an interesting little topic we could discuss maybe a little bit. And my couple of things I said back to him was like the thing to get motivated to learn. So I want to find a problem that I want to solve. It's fair and well just learning a concept, but if you have a problem that you want to solve, you're more likely to want to complete the project itself and use the new language or use the new framework or the new stack or something. And you can make a simple version and then maybe build it up. So say maybe start off with just making a blog with a MySQL database or something, and then you may be like, well, actually now I want to use a NoSQL solution. Maybe that's better fit for my blogging platform and stuff. And another thing I said to him was read code on GitHub. The code on GitHub, people, you post so much code on there now, and Google's great for being able to crawl and search for it all, so you can search on there, or you could just use GitHub search facilities, which aren't too bad, and you'll be able to filter it down for the language and stuff. And it's good to say, oh, has someone else already done this in the past? And being able to say, oh, what way have they done it and stuff. And I think I've learned more from reading people's GitHub profiles than I have reading a book cover to cover. I really just believe that it's just so much easier and nicer to see a working solution from somewhere else in the real world than seeing this hodgepodge blog post kind of, oh, here's a segment of code, here's a snippet of it, not the full thing.
One thing I would say, two things I'd say with that is, first of all, thank you for the feedback. Again, we really, really do enjoy it when you give us feedback.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And I had a guy, Adam Morris, tweet us this week as well, say that he's finding it really helpful. And it's great to know that
that was the guy. That was actually the guy.
Hello, sorry, that guy. All right, okay, yeah. I was wicked for him to send us that feedback. It was really helpful. But the second thing I was going to say, just about you talking about reading code on GitHub, and I know I spoke to you about this the other day, Ed, but I certainly find that I'm really poor at reading other people's code. I don't know why. It's when it comes to code, I'm a little bit dyslexic almost.
I think we're very biased to our own code, aren't we? I would have written this differently, or I want to change this. And I suppose one way I do that is by rewriting. So while I'm reading it, I'm rewriting it and maybe changing a variable name to a variable name that I would have called it. And then that makes me have to, instead of just doing a dumb rewrite, it has to make me think, oh, hang on a minute, they're using that variable there and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because I do find reading pages of code definitely isn't going to make you learn. It's the actual using it and then rewriting it yourself and digesting it that way really is going to be the way to let it sink in.
I think the only reason I mention it is just if anyone is starting out and they are reading other people's code and they're finding it hard, don't worry. It just, you do get better over time, and it will come easier to some people than others, I guess. But but don't feel stupid if it's not sinking in straight away.
Yeah. What have you been up to, Mike?
Good question. Basically, all weekend I was doing my uni assignment, and I was trying desperately hard not to basically call Ed Man in tears, and in the end, just failed miserably. But that was quite frustrating. And thanks to Ed Man, he gave me a little bit of help on that one. So
you were pretty much there, though, man. This is the annoying thing, isn't it? It's I can't really pretend to be the 90-year-old, but you were there pretty much. So. When
your code is 90% there, but that final 10% just could take you weeks, basically, because if you don't know it, you don't know it. It's as simple as. Yep. It was a bit like that. So, but yeah, I finally got that done. So that was a big weight off my mind. And but yeah, just the uni workload is huge. And but strangely, I've got 5 weeks left, and that's the academic year over.
No way!
Wow. So when does it actually close then?
We've literally 5 weeks left, and then people can still live on campus. We've got exams to do, but in terms of lecture and stuff, we're done.
That's crazy.
The people who've done it over 1 year, they're pretty much finished. 5 weeks left, and there's a reading week in that as well. So I think it's 4 weeks of lectures left. So it is ridiculously short academic year. Really, it's pretty insane. But I'm looking forward to it. To be honest with you, to just to be able to take a step back and reread a lot of material, because if I
when
get
are the exams? Because you've got you've got like a month, haven't you, off to?
Yeah, exactly. Like you've got a month off in April, basically, before exams start. So, so that'll be good to get out of the way. But other than that, I do have a couple of things I would like to bring up, actually, if that's all right. Just today, I've been working on some Magento on a Magento site.
Way.
Fraser, I've got a feeling you've worked on Magento before.
No, never touched it before.
I don't know where I've got that from.
Luckily.
It's a bit. Basically, I've done little bits of work on it before, but it's kind of been a hack here and a hack there. And I just had something coming up for a site, and I was like, you know what, I can't keep hacking away. I need to actually learn. So I followed a tutorial on basically how to create your own module. It's like a tutorial by Smashing Magazine.
Oh, yeah, they're good. They are good.
Yeah, they are good.
I hadn't heard of them before. But,
really?
Yeah.
They're massive.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's shocking. Well, there you go. I'll put the link in the show notes. But it's a really good tutorial, actually. Really simple. Just follow it step by step, and you create your own module. And basically, that everything you do in that module, you can then tap into the core Magento system, so you can go and get product information, all that kind of stuff. Definitely do it this way. Don't do it the hack way that I've done in the past. So,
what is their module like? Their module system like? You enjoy it, or is it WordPress? Dare I say it style, or is it MVC kind of?
It is MVC, yeah, because it uses Zen framework, but it is very modular. It's almost like HMVC, like what we were talking about last week. But like every module has like its own controllers, models, and you don't have views as such. And you've also got on top of that, you've got like XML config files.
So are you a fan of that? See, config files to me are kind of one of those things where some people like XML, some people like YAML, some people like JSON, and some people just like using like the language that you're given, like PHP or something.
I didn't like XML, but I do now. I kind of think, well, it's a very simple layout, actually. It's quite clean. I find it fairly easy to use. And like you say, it's like any markup language, I guess. Once you've got the idea of that symmetry, it's quite easy to put together. So, I think it's quite good, actually. About a couple of months ago, I was just slating Magento. I hated it, but that was mainly because I didn't understand it. I actually think it is really well put together, but that's probably quite controversial. I imagine people are pretty quite split on opinion of that. But it's considering it's open source and everything, it is amazing software to use, really. So, but yeah, I'll put that link in the show notes. And the other thing I was just going to say is today I was just helping a friend basically, but he's doing like this module on mobile or ubiquitous computing, is it? I think, and mobile computing. But basically, he had to build an Android app, and I was helping him out with that today. And actually, if you understand Java or OOPHP, it's actually really easy to use.
Yeah.
I was really, I think, I know obviously with things like, what's it called? Is it PhoneGap?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, you've got the advantage there that you can cater to both platforms pretty easy. But I think, for me personally, if I was going to make my first app now, I'd probably, even though I'm a massive Apple boy,
I don't believe you just said that.
I'd probably make an Android app first in Java straight up.
Yeah,
just because then it's clean and you know what's going on.
You're on your way down the Android path, aren't you? You're going to be.
No,
that is it. That's all I
was always exactly the same though, because I was always Mac and iPhone, all that stuff, and then I got my Android, and it's the greatest thing on the planet. Like, absolutely love it. It's so good, and like I don't even know what it is. It's probably just because it's pretty much the same thing but different, and it does the same stuff, and it's just like I think I'm still in the honeymoon period, even though it's been like 6 months now. But yeah, love it.
Oh man, it makes me cry to hear you say that. But
oh, it's so good though. I don't know why.
I think the thing is, I've got an Android phone for work, and just the amount of updates it does.
What one have you
got
for work?
Really infuriating. Is it the S4?
Oh wow, so that's a nice phone.
So
then.
pretty.
Oh, it's
pretty
all right
modern.
for some, isn't it? Wow.
I hate it. I find it completely unusable. Completely unusable. I'm going to get slated by our listeners for that, but
I hope so.
Can I swap it for a 5-year-old iPhone?
You probably would.
I probably would. Yeah. But yeah, I just bring that up in case anyone is, who's got a fair amount of programming language. If they do want to make an app, I would recommend them to do that because, like, all the package that you get from Android is really helpful. Documentation is really clear. Yeah, definitely give it a go.
Got a really good idea for an app as well.
Have you?
Flappy Bird. It's about this
I
bird,
finally
right?
played that, and it is insanely addictive.
It really is. What's your high score? I'm up to like 100. Let me see.
Man, I couldn't even get over the first couple, so let's not even talk about it.
I thought it had been taken out of the App Store or something.
It has, yeah. Like
the guy didn't want to deal with it, did he?
Well, apparently I reckon it's some like market employee or something. But yeah, I had a bit of a heart attack because when I had my previous Nexus stolen out of my pocket a couple of weeks ago, like I had Flappy Bird on there, and it was like 2 days after he pulled it out of the App Store. And I was like, I'm never going to get Flappy Bird back. But luckily, when I got my new Nexus and I turned it on and it synced itself up, it kind of synced all the purchases up, and luckily it was able to pull in Flappy Bird. So
were you more upset about losing the phone or the app?
I would say phone, but I was pretty devastated about the app.
Like, no, not the app.
And I lost all my Bitcoin as well.
No!
I say all my Bitcoin. I had like about $3 worth. So that's all gone. But I'll live without my $3 worth of virtual currency, which is going to dive into the ocean.
Sorry, just one last thing I would say about the Magento thing. For anyone who's like, who's just, I don't know, doing programming part-time, whatever, if you are looking to perhaps, start making an income from it, Magento modules, they sell for an absolute fortune.
Do they have their own store as well, don't they?
Magento?
Yeah. And this is what I don't understand, Magento. Is it open source and a paid version?
There is a paid version.
All I see is the price of it sometimes is ridiculous. Yeah. And what do you get with that version? Any better functionality or just support?
I'm sorry, man. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. But you're right. It's ridiculous money for the paid version. I think there's different levels, isn't there? But I know the top one is huge amounts of money.
It's the Magento Get Screwed version or something,
Pretty much, yeah.
Or the other X-Men as well.
So Lewis is out and you come in with the Lewis joke. I like it. I miss his leather chair. I'm missing the sound of the chair. It's not the same, is it?
It didn't make a peep last week, though, did it?
Did it not? I'm trying to think.
I don't know. I listened and I couldn't. Yeah, there was no reference to it, and I didn't hear it any time. But
disappointing.
Yeah.
So I guess you two, any hot picks?
I'll let you go first, Ed, while I think of one.
I've got a couple actually, because another link from that email I sent was, have you ever been on Code Academy?
Yes.
It's really good for starting, because I've got a couple of people that I'm teaching like PHP and HTML to and stuff, and I've sent them over there for a couple of weeks because it's just great, like the ability to be able to, you kind of do, you stay stimulated really because you're kind of doing some code on the left and then you're learning it on the right, and you can see the results and then subscribe, publish it and say, look, can you please, or submit, the answers. So it's pretty cool actually, Code Academy.
That sounds really good.
And then Twitter-wise, I've got two links. So on Twitter, I've got a Twitter handle everyone should be following, which is Codawall. And it's actually from a website called codawall.com. I don't know if any of you have heard Codawall.
No.
Rings a bell, but
it's really good, because it's like little snippets of interesting, people, developers pretty much put this is how quickly to set up. It's almost like the blogs that you can get in DigitalOcean and stuff, but smaller. Here's a handy little alias for your dot files. Here's a way how to quickly set up your Rails application, web server and stuff. Yeah. And the actual Twitter handle posts all of the top ones. There's a load of Git stuff on there, which is great. So I recommend adding that guy, subscribing to him. Him or her, and also maybe even creating an account with Codawall, because you can sign in with your OAuth, so you can use your Twitter handle, your GitHub handle, and just add in your snippets there, which I'm starting to do, and it's pretty cool. Another one is an old Twitter post that I remembered seeing way back in 2009, And it's from the guy who made Symphony. He seems to have made loads of stuff. He's a French dude that seems to have made so much stuff that he posted like this 140 character limit PHP router. So it's literally like a web framework in a tweet.
Wow,
that's insane.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, it's really bad code in the sense of it's using our friend at symbol and stuff to hide stuff, but it's quite cool to see what you can actually do in just 140 characters. And he's actually he's got a website called twitto.org, and twitto.org is a web framework in a tweet. He says don't use it for production, but it's quite fun just to see it and stuff. Like, what can you do in 140 characters or less?
That is pretty awesome. So I started following. Is it I Am Developer that you?
Yes,
right, last week. So good, man.
He always hits out the park. That every day he comes up with something so funny that you're like, this guy. Yeah. He must not have a job, and this is just what he does because it's crazy.
Yeah.
How many? Because he's got like tens and tens of thousands.
And he doesn't follow anyone, which is genius. That guy is popular. And my final thing for this week is Take the Tour. It's called Take the Linux File System Tour. And it's just a blog post about the file system in Linux, because coming from a Windows world, you go into like either a Mac or a Linux like distribution, you can get quite confused with where files are and stuff. And it does like this quite nice gimmick of what you're doing, like if you're on holiday in a tour bus or something, and it goes through and plays on that. But yeah, it's quite an interesting little read.
That's cool. Did you see the Web King Las Vegas thing that I posted?
Yeah, what is that a real thing, or is that some?
I couldn't work it out. I had a look at the source, and there was a meta tag for front page 6 in there.
Yes.
So he's either very authentic with it, or he's
trolling us amazingly.
Yeah, or it's genuinely a website from way back when. But yeah, if you look, there's some links to some of the projects he's worked on, and they're basically exactly the same. So it's phenomenal. So if anyone out there wants to go to webkinglasvegas.com, you'll see the greatest website ever.
I just like the audio as well. I like the fact you say put your audio on. So I put my audio on, and it was just perfect.
Oh, it is. It just, and the little photo of him at the top with the King's hat on as well. It's phenomenal.
Oh dear, you must have thought he was the dude. He was the
absolutely.
man.
I'm really tempted to sit down and crack a copy of front page open and then redo my personal website.
Oh dear.
Love it.
Any other hot picks from either of you, or are we all about done?
I think I'm done.
I'm done too. Yeah, I'm all out, mate.
We did say we're bringing a tweet of the week feature, but I don't know if anyone spotted anything this week. I must admit, I've not.
Well, my tweet was that it wasn't really of the week.
It
was more, of the past 4 years.
Okay, cool. No worries.
Deal with it.
Okay, so I guess we'll move on to our topic of the week then, which, as things go, we have changed it again. From what I said it was going to be.
What would you say it was going to be, by the way?
I think we said we would continue on with, we'd kind of finish off MVC, and we would have a look in some sort of framework.
Oh, sorry guys.
And I was trying to get Taylor Rockwell in, but...
that was funny. Can you explain that a little bit?
Did he reply?
No, not at all, man. Not at all. But
I don't want him anyway.
I will get him in on a podcast. I'm absolutely determined to do
he likes you. I don't know why, but he likes you.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's like or just pure hatred. But,
did you have a Barney? You're the one. He's the one that you had a Barney with, isn't he?
Yeah.
I
can't remember why. But,
and then you were both friends, and he was like, "Can I have a free ticket?" You said to the Eurocon, Laracon, and it was like, "No."
Really?
Yeah.
Well, we'll get him on anyway. Yeah, we'll get him on and bully him because there's 4 of us and one of him.
Go for it, Mickey.
Yeah. I will get him in at some point. So but yeah, we are going to talk instead about documentation, because it is something we said we would talk about a little while ago, because it is something that just looks really, really intimidating if you've not used it before. And I think hopefully this podcast will explain a little bit the kind of things you need to look for, because whenever you go and look at a function or something on the PHP docs, there's probably going to be a small amount of information that's vital, and there's going to be a lot of more information that's going to be, well, maybe comments from other people and just different ways of using that function. So what we hopefully will show you this podcast is basically how to hone in on the core details of what it's actually trying to show you, because it's not that scary. I think probably we would all, well, I don't know, I think it's changed for me, but you'll probably find that when you're trying to learn things, a lot of the time you're going to end up on places like Stack Overflow, because it'll seem less intimidating than PHP docs at first.
And also you have the examples, don't you? Because it's normally like, oh, I have this problem, and then the solution, it has like, it's catered around the problem that person's having.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, as you progress, I would encourage you to use the docs more. I mean, certainly, if you were learning something like Java, you would be taught how to use the documentation pretty much from the beginning. It just wouldn't survive without using the documentation. And yet, I think in PHP, a lot of the time, people wouldn't even look at the documentation.
I'm in that camp as well, because if you search for something and then, or in my mind anyway, PHP.net comes up, and I haven't got a clue what any of it means, so I'm straight to Stack Overflow.
Yeah, it's understandable. I mean, I think it looks a little bit more friendly now that they've updated the theme. The CSS, not huge amounts more, but it's a little bit more friendly.
It's a lot more 2.0.
Yeah.
Version on 3.0.
You know it.
So I'm thinking the best way to start off here, but I'm thinking maybe a function that we all use, and then we all bring up the docs and just explain what we're looking at, I guess.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
Awesome. Were you going to suggest a function?
I was, but you go for it.
Oh, I was going to say str replace, because that seems to be the PHP function that I use more than anything.
Absolutely.
And I could probably follow along with this because, simple.
Sounds good. Well, I've got it up in front of me now. Does someone want to, Ed, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure thing, man.
Yeah.
So str replace. So the nice thing about the docs is there's many ways, and we'll go through that afterwards. Like, there's quite a few ways you can actually look at them, and third parties have produced other outputs that you can see, which may be a little bit nicer. But so the first thing you get when you hit with this page, you've got the string place, which is the function you want, and then you've got, like, below it, it will see PHP 4 and PHP 5. Really, you're never going to deal with PHP 4 anymore. You're going to assume that PHP 5, but you will have functions that are only available in point releases, or dot releases, of PHP 5, such as maybe 5.4 and 5.5. So in 5.5, say you get the keyword yield, which is to make generators, but you won't see that in other ones. So it'd be interesting if you have a problem with a keyword or function and it doesn't exist. Maybe go to the documentation, better see why. Maybe it's your version that's out of date. So then you get a nice little description, and then you get the signature. And you get the signature, which is quite iffy, because in a language that doesn't have types, it does have types, but it doesn't have declared types. You don't have to declare the type, say a state, what this type actually does. This variable has to have a type, be this type, sorry. You get this idea of string place, and it's saying that it's returns mixed. So mixed means that it indicates a parameter that may accept multiple types. So that's a little bit confusing again, but what that actually means is it returns different things. So it could return a string, and it could return an integer, it could return a float. But in the case of the string replace one, it actually accepts and returns strings and arrays of strings.
Yeah. I guess one of the things, like, looking at the docs, I mean, I'm just looking at it now, and like you say, Fraser, I use this. Everyone uses it all the time, right? But I mean, did you know that this function accepted 4 parameters?
No, because I'm assuming the square braces mean that it's an optional.
Yeah, I think that's my understanding of it. Is that right, Ed?
Yeah. So if you go through it, so you've got your mix, which is your search, so that's what you're actually searching for. So that's what that's what you're searching for. That's what you want to replace it with, and then you've got your subject, and then the optional one, which is the ones that as you say, you've got it in curly brackets, is there's an integer. So this actually returns an integer, so it's not mixed, meaning you won't get an array back, or you can't put an array in it, or you won't return an array. It will be a integer, and what this actually means with the ampersand means that you're going to pass it a reference to a variable that you want to store that value in. So you're not returning anything there. It will actually insert the count into a variable that you pass there. So maybe you have, a string replace, you search for your word, you replace it, and you've got your subject, and then you say, okay, the amount of occurrences that this happened, put this in like occurrence variable. And then after that, you'll be able to use that variable and, echo it out, and you'll be able to see how many times that you actually replaced was actually done inside of that
right.
that call. That's very useful, like the replace, because you have like the matches. I'm sure you see that we have your matches, and then afterwards you get this variable. And that's just the ampersand, meaning it's by reference and not by value.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing is, if you were looking for this on Google and you went to Stack Overflow, you wouldn't necessarily know that you've got all those parameters because they're probably not going to show you. They probably show you the first 3 because they're the critical ones.
Yeah.
But, that kind of thing could come in really handy. So that's why looking at the docs, it gives you that little bit extra more detail, I think. And like you say, and this is certainly the case like with Java, and you can say with any kind of programming language or anything really, is that when you get down to the basics with programming, you're always doing one of 2 things. You're either accessing or you're modifying. With anything, that's all you're ever doing. And basically, with things like the documentation, you can see basically what you need to give it and what it gives you back. And clearly in the PHP docs, you've got the return values, and it tells you exactly what you're going to get back. And, with something like PHP, I guess, where, it's not really strict on data types and things like that, it's maybe less important. But certainly if you move on to things like Java, you'll need to know what you're getting back, or else you'll never compile anything, basically.
Yeah.
It's that strict.
Well, and also because in the world of web stuff, we typically use just text editors like Sublime, Dreamweaver is even a text editor, really. It doesn't have... I don't actually know if Dreamweaver does have the documentation on tap, and you have like NetBeans, and you have stuff like Eclipse, which then will give you these docs and give you actual visual input. So maybe when you do a string replace, you'll see that you need a search, a replace, and a subject, and it will be that these will be mixed and stuff. But like you can include it in your Sublime. That's what I've done. But it's not really like you don't start off in an IDE environment. Really, you start off in a Notepad clone.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. But it's definitely good practice to just get into that mentality of, okay, what do I need to give it? What does it give me back?
Absolutely. And as you say, like you'll find out, oh, hang on a minute, I was trying to count, the amount of occurrences that this occurred myself when I could have just passed it in a variable to use as a reference, and it would have been, the amount of times that I've realised there's a function that does it for me in PHP is ridiculous. And it's because, annoyingly, the functions aren't that well publicised. There's a couple even today when I was looking through some stuff that I'm like, I'd never even knew this existed. And if I knew this existed, I wouldn't have to rewrite the same code or bring, along this function myself. I think they could do a lot better thing. And as you say, there's documentation outside of it that allows you to search for it a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one of the things I was going to say as well, I think maybe we did talk about this in one of our earlier podcasts, but maybe Fraser, do you fancy fielding the print R function? Because I think that's pretty like something that's really, really important for anyone who's starting out, I guess.
Yeah, no problem. Because you've got print R and var dump, and they're both pretty similar, aren't they? So if I remember correctly, var dump it gives you the. Does it give you the data type as well? Not the data type. Yeah, it does give you the data type, doesn't it? Yeah, var dump gives you the data type, and print R just basically gives you an output of what's in it. So you've got an array and you want to know exactly what's in your array, you can do print R my array, and it'll give you a list of all your key pair values and what have you. So if you do it as a var dump as well, then that'll also list off. It'll say, okay, well, this is a string, or this is another array, and then this is a integer. And will it tell you that it's an integer?
Yeah, it will. It tells you the data type. It says like if it's null and what it's a null of. And also another thing interesting, if you brought up the print R documentation, I remember this, is that there is an optional second parameter which is return, and it allows you. And again, this function either
I did not know that.
It's either it does a side effect of actually echoing out for you, or you're able to return the thing. var export's similar to that, like with var dump. And another thing with print R and var dump is that var dump doesn't produce as nice an output as print R, and there are like alternatives. And I actually made, this is a shameless self-plug, I made like a var dump that is a bit more prettier, like print R, on my blog, because var dump I prefer, but the print R actual visualization of arrays is a lot nicer when you actually want to export it. But so you can do a return in print R, and that will actually return it to you, and you can input that into a string and maybe do some funky stuff with it, or you can use var export, which will do the same thing for the var dump.
That's pretty cool. Where do we find that? Because I wouldn't mind getting my hands on that anyway.
It's just edman.com, and I'll put it in the show notes.
Sweet.
Awesome. I was going to say one of the things that might be useful to go through is, and I'm using an example that I had to do in the last month or so, which again Ed helped me out with. But sometimes you have to be a little bit careful. If you're trying to, you might see something on the web and think, oh, that's exactly what I need. Depending on your installation of PHP and what libraries you've got set up, you might not be able to use certain libraries and functions. Sometimes you'll have to install extra things in order to get them.
And so also some get deprecated, which is another thing the documentation will tell you. It will tell you if they are deprecated and also when they've been removed, which a lot of people are kicking and screaming about with 5.5, because some things were deprecated in 5.4 or 5.3 and now being removed, and now they're complaining about it.
Yeah, exactly. And but basically, if you use the PHP docs, usually at the top somewhere you'll see something that says requirements, and you can just click on that and you'll see all that kind of information. I mean, I got burnt with this trying to bring in bringing in SSH connections in PHP, and it turns out that I needed this library installed. So just want to keep an eye out for, I guess.
Yep.
Do either of you got anything in particular that you wanted to mention about PHP documentation?
No, I mean, even kind of chatting about it with you guys now, it's kind of opened my eyes a little bit, because, like I said before, it's not the most friendly thing to look at, and it's a little bit intimidating, because I don't even bother, or I maybe will now going forward, now that I actually kind of understand what's going on. But beforehand, if a PHP.net result came up in the search results, I'd skip over it, wouldn't even bother clicking on it.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, if you guys are happy, then I think perhaps it'd be a good idea to just have a look at some of the big kind of things that we use day in, day out. And one of those things I was going to say, I don't know how you guys feel, but maybe implode and explode. And it'd be good to look at the documentation and just explain what's going on there.
Yeah, perfect.
So what do you fancy going through? What should we start off, implode or explode?
Explode, I reckon.
Go for it. Did you want to talk through it?
Yeah, I'll try and kick off. Basically, explode, what it lets you do is, you say you've got a string which you've got commas in. So say you've got a string of numbers. So you've got 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, 700 or whatever, and you want to get that into an array. There's this function called explode in PHP, and what it lets you do, you pass in the string. So you say explode, and then looking at the docs now, the first parameter that you pass it is the delimiter, which is going to be what you want to break it up by. So in this case, I guess you're going to want to break it up by your commas. So you'd put your comma as the first parameter, and then you specify your string after that. Yep. And then what that's going to do, if you assign that to a variable, your variable that you've assigned that to is now going to be an array with all those values. So rather than having a string with 1, 3, 5, 10, a million, you're going to have an array with all these different values populated in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm just looking at the docs now. I mean, I didn't know there was like a limit thing. Yeah.
Limit is really useful. When you only want to say, I only want to do up to this amount, maybe I only want the first 2, I like the last comma or something, maybe.
Yeah.
So will it discard?
It will keep it. It will just won't chop it off. It will think of that as just being a single element. And another thing.
So so it'll basically mean, say you limited it to 2. Does that mean the third element in the array would be everything, or the second element would be everything after that?
Yeah. So you'd have So you say I want 2. So you explode your first one, your second one, and then the last one would be all the stuff with all the commas still in there.
Yep.
And an interesting thing with this one is the description you see now. This is actually given, instead of mixed, you've actually got strict data types. You're saying, it returns an array. I require you to pass me a string, or I require you to pass me a string for the delimiter and also the actual string itself, the subject. And then also you've got the optional limit, which is an integer. And also there's a couple of other things. And if you read the parameters, that also gives you a nice little thing saying, like, this has to be set, and if it's set, it must be positive. And it also gives you a nice little thing about, what it actually does. And you say, like, so it says here, it's interesting, like, if the limit parameter is 0, then this is treated as 1. So they're kind of interesting, like these are the design considerations that they've made, and they've just produced a documentation for you then to be able to see. So without having to be like head scratching for maybe half hour on why it's doing a certain thing, maybe come here and you'll be able to say, that's why, because that's the design decision they made. An interesting thing also is like the return values after that. So it also tell you a return value because as I say, like, there's not strict data types per se. It may return a null, or there's interesting ones where, like, if I don't have something, so maybe a null is a valid thing. It's not a falsy value. If I don't have something, or if it really fails, it's going to be really false. It's going to be a triple equals false, meaning I definitely want a false value back. That will come back with the return value, so you can look in there. And then you've got the change log, which is always interesting, where you can see there, like, in, so you go, this is interesting. So 5.1 actually supported negative limits. But it's quite interesting. Maybe there is now actually the ability to be able to have a negative limit saying that I only want -1, so I only want the last one to be on its own, or I only want the last one maybe. And then finally, is the examples. The examples are great. They're kind of like the hidden special thing on PHP docs for the years and years of people who have done stuff and they're like, oh, this is a good way of doing it. But the trouble is because they're all hidden inside of this scary site, pretty much, a lot of people just wash over them. Like, a lot of the examples here are probably people who've just copied and pasted onto Stack Overflow.
Right. I'm with you. I'm just trying to think, I say that I use implode and explode a lot, and for people who just started out, they're probably thinking, what would you use it for? But I guess the common thing would be certainly back in the day before PDO, like MySQL statements and stuff like that would be quite handy. You've got a bunch of IDs and you want to update everything with this ID. Depending on how you had that format, you could then quite nicely, if you've got them in an array, you can then implode and basically say, okay, where ID in, and then just spit them all out in one string. So you're always going to have that different thing where you'll need to either explode or implode. It just happens so often.
Absolutely, completely agree there. I've got an interesting link actually that dochub.com. So if you dochub.io. So if you go to dochub.io, it's literally a crawl off the Mozilla Network's documentation for CSS, HTML, JavaScript from the Mozilla thing, and also the DOM, but also jQuery docs and PHP and beta Python. But if you go to it, you can actually see that you can quickly click on a link, click on one of the actual things at the top of language and type in a function and start it off, and it will just do a quick search, and you'll get the same information that you would have got from PHP docs, but in a kind of a nicer format where it's just quickly being able to get it. One other thing I use quite a lot in Sublime is a plugin called Go-To Documentation. It's kind of like really not a rubbish, but not as good version of what you can get in an IDE where it actually displays you the documentation for you. This, if you hover over a keyword and just do maybe one of your quick keyboard shortcuts on it, it will actually open up the documentation, the relevant documentation, so it knows it's a PHP file, so it needs to go to the PHP docs, and just opens it up to say, oh, is there actually a keyword with this in? So that's quite a nice little plugin what I use, and it's also it supports a lot of languages like Ruby on Rails, Postgres, Go, Clojure, Python, JavaScript, CoffeeScript, PHP. So it's got a lot of ability, lots of languages to be able to support out the box.
Yeah.
And finally is pman. So I don't know your manual pages in Linux.
Man pages.
I know. So if you have a problem with in Linux world, normally it's we'll just look at the man pages, which mainly mean the manual. So all the manuals, if you have I've got a function called ls, and you want to know what ls can do and what information, what options you can do in ls, you can type man space ln or ls, and that will give you the documentation in the command line of that, that actual command for you. A similar thing you can do, and another shameless plug on my site is I've set up, I just wrote a blog post a couple of years ago that I brought back up and tested, and it's a pair repository that's called pman, and it's just a PHP manual in that same way. But a nice thing about it then is you can actually, in your Sublime instance, because you can have a command line up there, you can stay in your command line instance and actually be able to do it. And one little project I'm thinking about doing is maybe rewriting the script that we've got for the go-to documentation, and all it does actually is just goes and loads it up in the command line at the bottom of the page, which would be quite cool. But it gives you the same implementation, but you're able then to do stuff like grepping it and Linux stuff. And one fun thing I did was I made the I'm feeling lucky thing in Google, and it would just give you a random page. So I've got I'm feeling lucky little alias, and it will pop up a random PHP function, like the man pages for it, just to say, oh, I never knew that. And I've done it a couple times, this function that's completely funky. So yeah, it's a good way of learning random PHP functions. Just go, I'm feeling lucky.
Nice. Can I just I just want to bring in a function that I've started using a lot recently, because I don't know if you guys have ever had this, but we had a client who ran a security check against a website. It just basically scanned for backdoors and all that, anything that was potentially dangerous.
Yeah. And
one of the things that we had come up with cross-server attacks, which I've got to admit, haven't really thought about before the scan came in.
Yeah.
And thankfully we were okay and stuff, but it did kind of alert us to some stuff. But I've started using. Have you heard of the FilterBar function in PHP?
No.
This is actually really helpful. But if you basically Google filter_var, basically what it does is it just gives you a tool basically where you can do one or two things. You can either sanitize a string, so it'll actually modify a string and give it you back, or you can like validate it to say, look, is it okay? And so it does that for you. But then also you've got, if you probably see a link on there that says type of filters, and then you can see split into like validate and sanitize.
Okay.
And then basically, if you look at like, for example, sanitize, you've got so much stuff there. Like, you can say, okay, we'll sanitize it, it's an integer. So it will make sure that whatever you get is just an integer. And I've been using it for things like, basically for like get variables, stuff that comes back in, because sometimes you might have JavaScript that actually brings in something from a get parameter. And potentially there's a possibility there then, depending on how good your SQL security is, potentially they could put something in the get URL bar and then pass that in and make a connection to your database and do whatever they want. But if you do all this kind of stuff, there's stuff in there that will stop that from happening. You've got filter, sanitize, string, all that kind of stuff. There's a load of stuff there that, probably a lot of people have just made their own functions in PHP to try and guard against, but this is all built into the library for you. So
it's one of those things, isn't it, where it's like, I've been writing an email validation script for years, and now I find it's already in the language core.
That was one of the awesome things when I first started using PHP, because obviously we all worked heavily together on for a company that uses a lot of classic ASP. So the first time I ever touched PHP, I was like, oh, this is amazing, because we were sitting there writing our own functions to sanitize strings, and you're basically having to look across the keyboard to see which keys could actually, or which characters could actually cause harm, and filter those out. And it's nice to be able to kind of just there's already function for it in PHP, and just loads of stuff like that there already is the functionality that we were painstakingly sitting there writing code for.
100%. I've been using that a lot recently. I really recommend it.
It's a really good function.
Yeah.
And a function get_defined_vars. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Well, you've just ruined my quiz, but carry on.
No! Oh,
you get -1 for that. So
no!
Write it down. Ed -1. Cool. Carry on.
Well, that screwed me up. Well, anyway, so that one is an awesome one because it allows you to work out what variables are in scope at the moment. It's awesome for stuff when you're doing views and stuff where you're like, I don't know if I've passed in that variable or something.
Oh, no way.
I just pass it in and you can say, and it gives you an array of all the variables.
Yeah.
It's
that
quite
sounds
cool.
really handy.
And I've kind of just ruined the quiz.
Well,
I suck.
There's another one.
Or you can let me try and answer that question.
There's another one that tells you all the files that have been included in that script as well.
Oh, I didn't know that one. That's
cool. That's quite handy. I found it with like Magento to find out what was going on because you couldn't easily see.
That's interesting because I always use the debug backtrace for that. So there's a function called debug_backtrace, and it gives you so much more information than you need. Just for working out that. So that's a cool one, actually, Because this is a function that the backtrace one just like gives you what's happening, line by line, what functions are being called. And obviously I like it sometimes what ones are being included. So knowing, there you go, it's one of those functions again that I could have just used that on its own without having to make my own one that just passed the include. So the more you learn. But there was one thing, so I'm like skipping around a bit, but there was one thing in Python that we all love Python, and there was a couple of tweets this person put out, and then this guy made, and it's a really clever idea that I really would like to see in PHP. And the idea is what it does is it launches a Google search for any exception that gets run. So any exception that happens on your Python app, it will just load up a Google search with that exception in, and maybe a little bit more information about it, because 9 times out of 10, someone else has already had that problem. Now, I think that's kind of cool, just on exceptions, So say you run your application and you throws an exception, and just what happens, an instant Google search comes up. Maybe even you could have it configured to do a StackOverflow search. So you could quickly go to it without having to copy and paste it in. Because I'm sure I'm very much like, I copy the whole line in, paste it in, what's this error and stuff, and just seeing that other people have posted the exact same error. So it's called What the What. But it's just a GitHub repo that I'll post up. But it's quite an interesting concept that could be, brought into other languages quite easily, and I think really pretty effective.
Nice. So I guess the question is, are you guys ready for the quiz?
I am.
Certainly am.
I am. And I'm not going to say...
Ed.
I know. Well, I'm -1 already. Oh, dear. Here we go. I've been waiting for this day.
I think I've lost the answers as well, so this is going to be a bit...
So we can come up with anything. And
we're just like, that's correct.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Ed, what's happened with your sponsorship from Cola Rebel? You've not really been mentioning.
It's quite interesting because Cola Rebel, they didn't, come back to me or anything. So what I'm now doing is it's Walker's Sensations. Thai sweet chili coated peanuts. So you've got the tight sweet chili crisps. You've got the coated peanuts now.
Oh, they sound pretty good.
Oh, they are stupidly nourished.
And if they sponsor us, they'll sound even better.
Even better, exactly. So yes, Sensations. They're sensational, and they're peanuts.
And that helps with programming somehow?
It's the only thing I eat or drink. Right. I actually, I blend it. But anyway, moving on. So
your keyboard must feel horrible.
My keyboard. I replace it weekly.
Yeah. All right, you guys ready then? Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Ready,
okay. All right.
Oh no.
Question number 1: can you compress a string in PHP?
Yes.
Yes. I'm just going to wait until Ed's answers.
Gzip compress, isn't it?
Oh wow. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Did you know that, Fraser?
I did not know that.
You're going to hate me. I found that out today as well because it was one of the ones that I was like, oh, I may actually talk about this.
Oh,
I've been cheating. This is cheating.
All right, so that's Ed minus 2
that is
now.
so cheating.
Ed minus 2, Fraser 0. Okay, all right. Okay, second question then. But yeah, that was GZ compress, and basically, I don't know why you would need this, and I'm guessing, I just don't know, because I'm guessing the actual
to a file or something, because I don't think it's a real string anymore.
No, it's not. If you echo it out, you
it's
just
like
get
just
loaded.
a byte. Yeah, it's like you have to unpack it and stuff. So maybe just for a straight, like putting it into a file, like byte file, because you couldn't actually go across the HTTP with it. So
true. Yeah. But yeah, it's there if you need it. GZ compress. Okay. Question number 2. Oh yeah. Question number 2 was how do you do it? Okay. Question number 3. Can code be executed after an exit function?
Good question.
I'm going to assume yes, because the only reason I'm saying yes is because I personally think no, but I reckon yes. I'm playing game theory here rather than actually playing the thing. You wouldn't have asked the question if it wasn't possible.
I'm going to say no because I just no.
Yeah, final answer. Okay, Fraser is right. Good logic there. So
nice
good logic.
Go for it, man. How the hell?
Okay,
what's
so basically, I was just looking up cool functions basically before I came on. But there's a function called register_shutdown_function, and basically it will execute that code even if an exit statement. It basically you put it at the bottom of your script and it will do something regardless of if there's an exit there or something like that.
That's it, because there was another function I found which says set. I hope this is not going to be one of yours. Set_exception_handler.
Okay,
and also
nice.
set error handler. So this is what Laravel do, where they can maybe you want to say, anytime I get an error, I want to log it to a file, or anytime I get an error, I want to email it to me. Maybe you can actually just pass in, make this, and it actually will use your function handler instead of the inbuilt PHP one.
That is very cool.
Which is quite cool. So you can quickly do stuff like that.
Oh, can you put that in the show notes and send it to me? Because I would really do that. Actually, that's great. So Ed -3 for putting in there. Cool. So that's functions there if you need it. All right, next question. How can you print out PHP code with full syntax coloring?
highlight_file.
No, another -4. Fraser.
Copy and paste it into Sublime.
1 point for initiative.
Thank you. I have no clue.
It is highlight_string. And they're basically in your quotations, you put in your code, and it will give you the...
That's so cool, isn't it? But why, I always think to myself, why would we need it, in a sense? But... Yeah. It's one of those functions, hey, you've got it, you might as, you need it anytime.
I thought it was quite cool. I had no idea about it, so...
I think, do you remember back in the day that you used to be able to do, PHP-S, and it would show the source version, the actual source code of the file?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you can add. I think it may use that behind the scenes to do it.
I'm with you. Next question then. What function returns an integer of the number of chars that are different in 2 strings? So it compares those 2 strings and tells you how many chars out there are.
I know this one. I'm going to be... No.
I'll let you go for it because I don't have a clue. I didn't even know that was something you could do.
Levenstein?
Oh, how do you know that? That is ridiculous.
I've been looking at it today.
All right, you've clawed one back. You're -3. Fraser is 2. And last question. The last question was one that Ed answered anyway, which was a function that returns an array of all vars being used. So the winner is Fraser, 2, and Ed -3. So that carries over.
Well, I ruined that game.
Yeah.
So is that 2 quizzes out of 2 that I've won, or was it? There wasn't a quiz last week, was there?
There was. Lewis beat me.
He beat you, didn't he? I think
he did.
Yeah. He's not good enough, mate. Not good enough. I've actually got. I've got three other functions that I wouldn't mind saying about.
Yeah.
You can do like counting how many characters are in a word. Well, you can also count how many words are in a string.
Yeah.
Already, just interface string _word _count. I never knew about that.
Oh, that's
so you don't
cool,
have to you don't have to split up the word or anything. You and count it in an array format. Yep, string _word _count. It's pretty.
Just before you go to the other 2, sorry, I think we need to say goodbye to Fraser Hart.
Because indeed, I need to shoot. Unfortunately, pretty much 8 on the dot. But it's been a pleasure. And
see you later, Fraser.
I won't be here next week, but I'll be back in 2 weeks' time. And really do appreciate all the contact we've been getting from everyone. It kind of makes everything worthwhile that we know that people are actually listening and for the most part enjoying what we're doing. So actually for the entire part, what we're doing, we've not had a single bit of bad feedback. So maybe.
Oh no! Don't say that. Now it's just going to be berated. It's like, you're right.
I'm just going to get like hate mail. I'm going to wake up tomorrow with a mailbox full of just horrible emails. But thank you all for listening, and I'm going to duck out, and I will see you in a couple of weeks.
See you later, player.
See you later, man.
See ya.
As well. See you later.
Oh dear.
And then there was
that Fraser. God,
I hate him. I really hate him.
His microphone sounded awesome, didn't it?
It sounded really good.
But the last three functions, I cheated.
Yeah.
I said 3 last time, but I lied. Is check date, which validates a date, and it's awesome. And
3 integers or something?
Yes, absolutely. And it validates it, which is great.
Yeah.
And another one's date _pass, which I know that you can do just with your objects and stuff and have your date time object, but just having that and then it be able to return either a false, I think it returns, or exception if it's an error, if it's not a valid string, or just returns an array with the year, month, hour, day, blah, blah, blah. So it's maybe, you quickly want to get the month out of the day, out of the actual string, check that that's valid, you can pipe it through this, and it's really cool.
Very nice. Yeah.
And finally, there's one more. And how do you normally make a random, unique-ish string? If you were to make something that's random,
I usually do something like an MD5 on rand or something.
Absolutely, I use MD5 time, and it's like, I've been using it for a year. Today, I found out there's actually a function called unique ID.
Really?
Yes, there is a unique ID. It does the exact same thing we want to do, but you can also add it. It gives you a 13 character long string.
Yeah.
And you can also add more entropy, which just means more randomness, and it will give you a 23 character string. And you can add a prefix in there. It's got an optional adding a prefix if you're using it, on multiple servers and stuff. But unique ID. So it's a function. It's one of those functions again where you're like, I remake my own one again and again and again when I could just use one out of the box. So
yeah.
It makes you just look. It makes you seem like a silly Billy like Louis. And
every day is a school day.
Every day is a school day, definitely. But
well, awesome. I think we have just we've gone over the hour mark, I guess. So, if you got anything that you wanted to mention before
I haven't got anything else to say, really. No, I think it's pretty much all done.
On my behalf, I would say, again, I would really stress, don't be intimidated by the PHP docs, because I have been for years, to be honest with you. I guess only in the last year or 2 that I've started using it more. And probably that it's just mainly because I got into Java and started using the Java docs because I had to.
I think that's it, isn't it? Is the having to, isn't it? Because the PHP world, there's so much content online already, and it's all been reproduced. You never actually go to the source because you always go to these third parties. And Java is very much everyone goes to the Java docs, and it's like that in the Python world as well, where it's go to the docs.
Exactly. But I guess this is going to put you in really good stead if you can learn using PHP documentation now, and in a few years you're tired of PHP, you want to move on to something else. Don't know where you ever would be, but say you are, then you're going to be in a really good position to then start picking up things like Java docs and, like you say, Python docs or whatever.
Couldn't agree more.
Don't be intimidated by it. Just focus on what you need to, the information you need to get out of it. So what you need to give it, what does it give you back? And literally, they're the 2 things for me that you really need to know. And they're pretty well documented. The parameters section will tell you what you need to give it, and the return values tells you what you get back. And just get into that mentality, and then everything else is just additional detail for you. So yeah, if you want to be, if you want to get good at what you do and really learn your trade inside out, PHP Docs is the way to go. So I guess that's about it from us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, sir.
And I'm not going to say what we're going to do next week because
we're going to we'll build your hopes up and then we'll crush them. So
exactly.
we will do a podcast next week. That is for a fact.
We will definitely do a podcast next week.
It'll be around an hour, I reckon, the podcast. So you've got that in the bag.
And we'll have Lewis.
I'll have Louis Scholar,
Lee Meister General, back with us. So yeah, and as always, and I know we said this a few times today, but feedback, we really do like your feedback, and we'll definitely try and cover any topics that you give us. So yeah, keep it coming. All right, thanks, guys. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Cheers.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.